Masechet Chagigah Daf Kaf Amud Aleph. We were just mentioning yesterday, Amar Rav Mari says, Shmami, I've learned from here the chulin, which is going to be eaten on Taharat Kodesh, which means on a certain level of Taharat, just like Kodesh. Remember, chulin is mundane food. If it's going to be eaten on the Taharat Kodesh, it's like Kodesh. So says the Gemara, Mimai, how do we know this? He says, from the fact that we did not learn a ma'ala, which means we did not learn, right, the hierarchy, which means that we did not learn that it's going to be bigdei prushin or going to be ochli chulim mitarech chulim. It's considered like that, so therefore it's going to be the Taharat Kodesh. Says the Gemara, maybe the reason why they did not learn the ma'ala, right, they eat damu letrinua, because if it's going to be that they're going to come and they're going to say that it's like truma, tani truma, we already learned truma, v'idami lechulin, and if it's going to be compared to chulin, hatani lechulin, we already learned chulin also as well. The Tanam, as we learned in the Mishnah and Tarot. The Mishnah and Tarot says, this is bet, right? Tarot perek bet, Mishnah chet. Chulin shenasu al Taharat HaKodesh, harehen kechulin. Chulin, which is done on Taharat HaKodesh, is like chulin. It's like truma, which means that basically what's happening is that a person is trying to eat something mundane, right? They're eating a croissant over here. The croissant is mundane. It's not maaser, it's not truma, it's not kodesh, it's not mechatat kamuvan, it's nothing. Yeah? Yeah? That a person has to realize that when they're going to be eating the chulin, what are they eating it on? Are they eating it on the taharat of a kodesh? So what is the halacha? That means they are taking note that they are ke'ilu eating it as if it's kodesh. So if it's going to be like that, the first mandamar said, it's going to be like kodesh. What does it mean kodesh? It could be kama, sheni, shlishi, and a revi'i, just like kodesh. Here all of a sudden, we're saying, chulin, which is done in taharat of kodesh, is like chulin. That's the first shita. Second shita, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Tzadok says, no, it's not like chulin, it's like truma, but it's not like kodesh. It doesn't go all the way up to kodesh. So it's like truma. What is the maximum of truma? What's the maximum of truma? It's not written on the phone. Yeah, what's the maximum of truma?
Maximum of what? The
level of truma for truma.
Sheni.
No. Shlishi. Right? Shlishi. Says the Gemara, Ela min Seifa, but rather it's from the Seifa. What does the Seifa say? Yosef ben Yoezer ya Chasid shebekiuna. Yosef ben Yoezer, he was a Chasid in the Kivuna. Yeah, what does that mean? He was one of the Chasidim. And what happened was, Vaitam mitpachto midras lakodesh. His mitpachat was tameh, just like midras lakodesh. He always used to eat on Taharat HaKodesh. Vaitam midras chatat, so the mei chatat. The chatat in lakodesh lo says what? Only for chatat and not for the kodesh. Alma kasavar. So you see from here, chulin shenasu al Taharat HaKodesh kodesh tamu, which means you see from the Seifa that he holds that any type of food, right, which is chulin, and you come now and you're going to eat it al Taharat HaKodesh, it's like kodesh. Meaning like this, right now, we're all Tumemet, and I want to eat now a croissant. Croissant is chulin. It's not maser, meaning it's not maser sheni, it's not truma, it's not korbanot, you understand? It's nothing of those things, okay? So now, what it's going to say now over here is as follows. Yeah, now it's going to say like this. It says, I'm going to come and I'm going to eat this croissant, but I'm going to eat it b'kedusha v'tara. Yeah, I'm saying l'shem yichu kucha b'richu mamash b'kedusha v'tara. So now the fact that I'm going to eat it b'kedusha v'tara, what happens? I want to eat it al Taharat HaKodesh. Now remember, when we're going up in the levels, you have chulin, maaser, teruma, then we have kodesh, then you have mechatat. So remember, chulin can become rishon v'sheni. Okay, the maaser could become a shlishi. Chulin maaser could become rishon v'sheni. The truma could become a shlishi. Kodesh could become a revi'i, right? And that's the final step. Okay, that means that's how we could remember. When I say rishon, sheni, shlishi, why is it so important to know? Because I can't just say, what's the big deal? Rishon, shlishi, sheni, sheni. No. Everything has to be precise because that's the levels of tumah. So for example, let's say I'm going to come and I'm going to touch, or I'm going to be in the vicinity of a person that was deceased. Okay, so he's avi avot tumah. So I become an avat tumah. right? When I touch somebody else, he becomes a Rishon. He touches him, he becomes a Shani. He touches him. Right now, a human being cannot become Shlishi, cannot become a Revi'i. So it doesn't go on forward, right? It stops, right? So an Adam, right, after the Rishon, that's it. Okay? Now, for the Shani, it could become a food and things like that. Now, for Truma, it could become a Shlishi. For Kodesh, it could become a Rev, which means like this, right? I touched the deceased person. Okay, he was right, Aviyav Otomot. I'm the Avatuma. I touch, right, the Rishon. He becomes now a Rishon. He comes now and he touches, right, Roneh Michael, nothing happens. Why? It stops for a human being. Human being stops the Rishon. Now what happens is, if he's going to touch now the food could become a Shani. But let's say right now, right, he would have been the Shani, right? For example, or he's now going to touch the food. The food cannot come. Which one?
If you don't mind, I'll move you.
Okay, yeah, it's not. It cannot make the food after that because that's chulin. Chulin is the lowest level of food. Since it's the lowest level of food, it doesn't exist by chulin to become a shlishi or a revi. Okay, it doesn't exist. It's only by truma can become shlishi. By kodesh could become even revi'i. It's an extra level of tum'ah that it could continue.
So
the
more holy,
tum'ah.
so it can be more.
Yes, 100%. That's always like that. Only a Jew is mitameh be'ohel. Why? Because since there's more kedusha in the Jew, is mitameh be'ohel. Okay. The Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yonatan ben Elazar, says Rabbi Yonatan ben Elazar, right? Nafla ma'afarto hemenu, ve'amar lechavero tena, right? Tenea li, untana lo tmeah. Imagine right now, right? If a beged, right, the clothing that was on his body fell off from him, right? And all of a sudden he comes and he tells his friend, can you give it to me? And he gives it to him. It becomes tameh. Why? Because the fact that there was a sechadat, it becomes tameh for the machmirim b'taharot. Meaning the people that are so machmir and all these things of taharot, the second that for one instance it's not there, right? They didn't pay attention to what's going on, it becomes tameh. And that's why we're saying there are certain people, these were the chasidim of the Kohanim, that they were eating chulin b'tahara, meaning that they were treating the chulin as if it was kodesh, as if it was mamash like that. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yonatan ben Amram, nitchalfu lo kelim shel Shabbat bechelim shel kol, ulvashan nitmeu. The same halacha would apply if a person has begadim of Shabbat and they got mixed up between begadim shel kol, right? Or the opposite. That means he basically took the begadim of Shabbat instead of begadim. Ulvashan he put them on. Nitmeu. The bigdei Shabbat becomes tameh with a sechadat. Right? Again, why? Because of this halacha that they have to be all the time making sure that they're not having their mind removed from it. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok, says Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok, Maaseh b'shtei nashim chaverot. There were two women that they were chaverot, that they were friends. And again, they were also very, very careful in dinei tahara. They went to the bathhouse and their clothing got changed. Right? What does it mean? They exchanged the clothing. They didn't realize. Right? Remember that, first of all, everyone, they had a public bathhouse. It wasn't a private bathhouse. Everyone used to go to the public bathhouse. Right? Like the way Mikvah Torah and Eretz Yisrael, everyone would take off their clothing in an outer room. Right? Everybody would take off the clothing there, and then they would go into the inner bathhouse, and that was the actual bathhouse. So what happens is everyone has their clothing there. It's not like nowadays that you have one person with a boss, another one with, no. Everyone, usually they wear the same clothing. So what happens? Sometimes they could get mixed up. So they switch the clothing. So it says here, right? Right? Comes the story in front of Rabbi Akiva, Mitimian, and he contaminated both of them. So Matkif la Rav Oshaya says, Rav Oshaya, Lamiata, 1 second. Hoshit yado lasali tol pat chitin ve'alta lo pat seorim hachana midinitmet. Are you going to tell me now, let's say you have a basket of breads. You put your hand inside the basket, and you want to take out pat chitin. And all of a sudden, instead of taking pat chitin, you took out pat seorim. Are you going to tell me now that in such a case, that because the bread is different and you thought it was a different bread, it becomes also tameh? If you're going to tell me, yes, be'emet, it becomes tameh. But Tanya, I thought we learned it right. Right? He says, 1 second, if you thought that was inside, it was wine, and then at the end, it was actually oil, it's still ta'or miletameh. So therefore, shemirat chefetz, aldat chefetz acher is still considered shemirat. Meaning the fact that I still had a mind to watch it over, you're right. I thought it was chitim, and then it was seorim, or whatever. But at the end of the day, I still wanted to keep it the ta'ara, b'ktushav ta'ara. So that should be good enough. So says the Gemara, fine, and according to your reasoning, that the shemen is not going to be mitameh because it's considered watched over. Let's see the Seifa. The Seifa says, Va'asura milechol, you're not allowed to eat the oil. Amai, why is it going to be a sur milechol? If you're watching over it, so why are you not allowed to eat it? So Rabbi Yirmiyah comes and he says, Be'omer, we're talking about a case that a person is saying, Shemartia midvar metame'ah, v'lo midvar posla. I was only watching it from something which was metameh, but not something which is posel. So if you look on the footnote there, he brings you back, if you remember, to Yudchet Amud Bet, Ha'ara 5. So there in Ha'ara number 5 on Yudchet Amud Bet, it speaks about the entire thing. And it says over here like this. It says, you have it there. In Ha'ara, you have it there. In Yudchet Amud Bet on the Mishnah. Mamash, that's where it says. It says like this. Adam anogea be'ava tumah, a person, a human being that touches an ava tumah, he becomes a rishon. So me'achar shetumah zu midoraita, since it's toraita, his entire body becomes tameh. And he becomes tahor through tevilat kol gufo b'mikveh. He has to completely immerse himself in the mikveh. Mina Torah, Adam anogea b'rishon letumah, right? He is tahor. So mina Torah, right? He comes and he touches him. He's already a Arishon. Adam anogea b'rishon, he's tahor. Chachamim went and they made an institution that the yadayim shenagu b'rishon nitmeu v'nasu shniot. They become now sheni letuma.
Just the
Okay,
hands.
the hands. Or tiknu, another institution. She'efshar litaer mituma zu al netilat yadayim me'akli. You could do netilat yadayim or al yedei tevilat yadayim in the mikveh. Means you don't use your entire body. Netilat yadayim or tevilat yadayim?
The whole man does not come sheni, just the hands.
Just the hands.
So sheni.
Because remember, that's the Rabbanan. Everything is the Rabbanan. Because Doraita, the Rishon, right, is nothing. I mean, one more time. That means a man that's a Rishon, he cannot go onwards. Now, the Chachamim came, they instituted. Okay, then it comes and he actually speaks about other ones. They're not going against the Torah. They're adding on to the Torah. The Torah says that a Rishon stops, the buck stops here. They are adding on. They are adding on with Tahara, that now it goes another level.
But he can
That extra level,
right? Even
so, what we were saying before was that there's a concept of something which is mitameh and something which is posel. The concept of mitameh means that it disqualifies it and it still has the power to be mitameh other things. Posel just disqualifies it, but it does not, it breaks the chain. Right? That's what we saw before. Okay? So therefore there's a difference over there. So says the Gemara, does there exist that you could do shemirah for halfway? Meaning, what are we trying to say over here? We're trying to say that ki'ilu there's shemirah, right, on halfway. What is halfway? It's either you're shomer or you're not shomer. No. I'm watching it that it doesn't become tameh, but I'm not watching it that it doesn't become pasul. Does that make sense? Saying it's either that you're watching it or you're not watching it. How does it mean that no, I'm watching it that it doesn't become tameh? So therefore it's going to be mitameh other things, but I'm not watching it to become pasul, but it cannot be mitameh other things. It says, right? So it says, yes, it does exist. Why? The time is we learned in a braita. Imagine right now a person comes and he puts his hand inside of a basket. The basket is full of figs, of tenim. The asal al ketifo, right? And you've got a sal. The basket is on top of your shoulder. The magrefa is inside of the sal. The magrefa is basically a utensil. I don't know how you say it in English. Which the shovel. Okay, the shovel. That you're taking out the efer from the tanur. So you're cleaning out all the ashes from the oven. Okay. So he says the magrefa betoch sal. Vaya belibo ala sal. Right. That means you were watching over the sal, the tenim, to make sure you didn't pay attention now to the magrefa. Now, but remember, magrefa, the shovel is inside the basket, right? It's inside the basket. It says, asal tahor, magrefa tmeah. The sal is tahor, but the magrefa is going to be tmeah. So says the Gemara, hasal tahor, how could the sal be tahor? Tetameh magrefa the sal. One second. What am I saying? I've got a basket. Yeah, I've got here the basket, right? Pretend that the tea inside the basket, inside the thing, that's the figs, okay? I've got now, right? I've got the magrefa inside. I'm going to tell you, no. The basket and the figs are pure. The magrefa, the shovel, which is inside, it's tameh. Ask the Gemara, it doesn't make sense. If you're going to tell me that, so then this which is tameh should disqualify the entire basket. What's going on exactly? Something's wrong here. So he says, hasal tahor, tetameh magrefa hasal. Answers the Gemara, en kli metameh kli. A utensil right, cannot be it cannot be mekamel tuma unless it's from an ava tuma, just like a human being, as I told you before. Which means, right, that one utensil cannot disqualify another utensil. And a utensil could disqualify food, but it cannot, disqualify another utensil. So a kli cannot be mitameh another kli. So says the Gemara, you're right. Okay, I cannot disqualify the basket because the basket is a kli from the magrefa, which is another kli. But the magrefa should be mitameh the figs. The figs is a food. So therefore, that could be mitameh that. So Ravina comes and he says, Be'omer shemarti midamar shemetamao ve'lo midavar pasul. He says, no. You went and you said, I made sure that the magrefa did not become tameh with something which is mitameh other things. But I didn't watch it from something which is poslo, which means this. The magrefa cannot be mitameh the te'anim, because since you watched over it not to become tameh, it cannot continue the cycle. The buck stops there, just on that. But the magrefa itself is pasul, meaning that the magrefa itself could become pasul, but the magrefa cannot continue the process. It's like a person that, just understand, right? They could become infected with an infectious disease themselves, but it's not strong enough to continue going. So therefore, they were very careful, right, that they're not going to come and contaminate themselves with something which spreads. It was something that they could get themselves in, that they weren't careful with doing that. So the kli becomes pasul, but not tameh. Again, remember, pasul means it's disqualified, it's tameh, but it cannot be mitameh other things. When you cannot continue the chain, right? So then you call it pasul, you don't call it tameh. If it continues the chain, so then it could become tameh. Right? Even for a kli, for anything, even for a human being. So says the Gemara, one second. What? Says the Gemara, mikom makom kashia, but still, now we have a question. Because the question is, how does Rabbi Yonatan ben Amram ben Elazar ben Tzadok come and say that shmirat al chafetz al dat shu chafetz acher is not considered the shmirah? Here the writer is telling you that it's somebody that's going to be shomer the chavit in the chazakah that it's wine and became shemen. It's tehor abin tameh ochlim achari. So it's tahor, it's not tameh. The odd motive, right? There's also another question, Rabbi Ravua. Another question from Rabbi Ravua from a writer. It was a story of a woman that she came in front of Rabbi Ishmael and she told him, Rabbi, you should know, I was pure when I was weaving this clothing. And I weaved this entire clothing, but I did not have in mind to watch it, right, from becoming tameh. So Rabbi Ishmael comes and he starts making hakirot, right? Maybe this happened to you, and you weren't careful, and this and that. Amralo, and she said, Rabbi, nida mashcha imi bachevet. Right, there was a nida that she came and she was also tying, right, to the kli harigah. She was also doing it there. Now we know that a nida that comes and she's doing these things, it's also mekabel tuma. So therefore, right, even through something else, it's mitameh. So Amar Bishmael says Bishmael, right? She's a human being, is a nida, right? No, but she went and she was mashchai mi bechevel. So therefore now the chevel becomes tameh because of the nida. So he comes and he says like this. He says, right? Kama gdolim divrei chachamim shayu omrim belibo l'shomrot tahor, em belibo l'shomrot tameh. Look how great were the words of the rabbis. That the rabbis say only if you had the chavana to watch it, it's tahor. The second you lose kavanot, it's tameh. Why? Because look at this case. She comes and she says, listen, Rabbi, I was pure. I'm coming and I'm weaving. It should probably be pure, no? So now he comes and he starts his chakirot. One question, maybe this happened, maybe that. And finally, he was able to get out of her. So 1 second, there was another woman involved. And the other woman involved was a nida. So now if there was another woman involved and she was a nida, and now this nida was isita bechul davar mekabel tuma, so therefore it's going to be mitameh oto. So now this clothing becomes tameh, right? So therefore it's a problem. So he comes and he says, look how great are the words of the rabbis. Another story with Rabbi Ishmael. A woman comes and she says, Rabbi, right? I made this mapa before it was a clothing, now it's a mapa. It was a tablecloth, right? And I'm weaving it, and I didn't pay attention to watch it. Again, Rabbi Ishmael comes and he does hakirot. What are hakirot? Mamash, to start asking questions. And by the way, you should know this is very, very, very important. You don't know how many times people that come and they ask questions, And if you're not choker, right, it's a completely different case. A completely different case. And it changes halacha right, left, and center. But they don't even know how to ask the question. So they can't tell you half the story. Right? And he said, no, but one second, what are this? Right? And I still remember it happened to me. I remember somebody came to me and said, Rabbi, you know that what's halacha this? And when I told him a psak, then afterwards they said, yeah, but I asked the other rabbi and he told me the other thing. So then I started thinking, no, there's something wrong here. So I started investigating. And then I found out, yeah, because you either didn't tell him the entire story or you told me a different part of the story, which means that's why you got a different psak. If you would have, what? It was you forgot, right? So he says, right, vodka, he comes and he says, right, check it. He says, right, vodka, right? He comes and he says, I don't want to embarrass you publicly. You're already asking, what am I going to do? So he said, vodka, yeah. He comes and he says, vodka, right? He checked her, right? Amralo, she said, Rebbe, nima nifsekali ukshartia bapeh. What happened is that all of a sudden she said there was a chut. There was one of the threads that it broke, it tore. What did I do? I came in with my mouth, I made the knot through my mouth. Now, she was temeah because she didn't do tevilah yet for her nidah. So therefore, she didn't pay attention to it, right? Why? Because this was before she started doing the Hagigah, and therefore it wasn't still a beged, it wasn't a clothing. In order for a clothing to become tameh, it has to have a certain measurement, right? The fact that it was only a string, it wasn't tameh yet. But Rabbi Ishmael knew that we're going to suspect that maybe she already did 3 by 3 fingers, and 3 by 3 fingers is already considered a keli. So now that it's a keli, now it can become tameh. So he comes and he says, now if it's the rock, the phlegm that was in her mouth is still moist on top of the chut, on top of the thread, right? It's the rock of anida is of ava tumah. That means the woman's anida, right? The phlegm of a woman that she's anida is an ava tumah. Remember, when we're talking about tum'ah, we're not talking about stam, right? Mamash, it's an ava tumah. That's why we know that in the olden days, it was such a tum'ah, right? The nida, right? That they already knew, right? They already knew in the olden days, we know that even Lavan, Arami, did not speak to his own daughter. Why? She says, Derech nashimli, I'm a nida. Tell the daughter, get up, I want to check underneath you. She comes and she says she's an ida. Her father does not even speak to her. That's it. Okay, that's it. Who says this?
Yeah, but I don't think because Tahara. I think
the Ramban.
Yeah, but I don't think it is because of Tahara, right?
Nachmanides said that the second that she said Derech Nashimli, it was like out of bounds.
But it's not because of Tahara, Rabbi.
It's out of Tahara.
No, back then they didn't have what they have today, so she was.
They said,
it's not nice.
Amar Rabbi Ishmael, it says Rabbi Ishmael, right? I'm reading to you a Ramban, Nachmanides. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Ishmael, says Rabbi Ishmael, Kama Gdolim Divrei Chachamim, look how great are the words of the Chachamim, right? He says, Shayu Omrim Belibo Leshomro Tahor and Belibo Leshomro Tamed. And only if they actually have in mind to watch it, then it's going to be Tahor, and if not, it's not going to be Tahor. It's good according to Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok. Kol achat ve'achat omeret, chaverti eshet ha'ma'aretz u'mascha data mineh. Because basically, it's good according to Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok, because he says that Rabbi Akiva was metameh begadim that got mixed up in a bathhouse, right? So then we don't have this question. Why? Because each one is going to, these women is going to say that her friend is wearing her clothing, and chaverti eshet ha'ma'aretzi, right? Her friend is in a ma'aretz, and maybe she doesn't come and she doesn't do dineh tara. And she did not, right, have a sechadat, and therefore it's going to become tameh. Okay? Also, according to Rabbi Yonatan that he switched between Bigdei Shabbat and Bigdei Chol, given the Kelim B'Shabbat Avilu Shimur Tfei, because people are much more careful in Begadim B'Shabbat than Bigdei Chol. So therefore, Minayu, so therefore he's going to be Masiach Dat from watching it much better. But according to Rabbi Yonatan Elazar, that he was mitameh, and somebody that he came and his clothing just fell to the floor, and then his friend passed it over to him. Why can't he watch it when it's in the hands of his friend? And there's not going to be a sechadat. Meaning his friend is bending down, picking up the clothing. Why? He can't do shmidah right then and there. So says the Gemara, he says there's a chazakah that a person does not watch something which is in his friend's hands, which means, right, that a person that's saying to himself, right, he does not know if he's tameh or tahor, right, and he's asking me, so therefore obviously he's not choshesh to the tarot. So because of that, I'm not going to watch it either. Meaning the fact that somebody comes and he says, you go pick it up. Did he ask me now if I'm tahor or tameh? He didn't ask me. The fact that he didn't ask me, that means he's not careful about it. So therefore, I'm not going to be careful either. So says the Gemara, velo, what? Meaning the fact that he didn't ask him means that he doesn't want to be careful either. Kafa mubet. Tanya, we learned in the Braita. Haresh ayu chamarav upo'alin upo'alav tunin tarot. Imagine right now you have your workers, right? These are the, remember, the chamarav are the people that ride the donkeys. These are the donkey riders. Okay, upo'alav tunin tarot. And the po'alim, they have the tarot on them. Afal pi sheiflig mehen, even though they distance themselves more than 2,000 amot, tarotav teorot. So what happens? It's still going to be tahor, which means we're not going to suspect that they opened up the bottles and they touched the wine. Why? Because since he didn't tell them how far away he is, they're always afraid that maybe the balabait is going to come back, and that's it. Understand? So the balabait, he's the owner. He didn't say how far distance himself was. If he told them, listen, I'm going to go over there, and he's going to be far away, so then they know that once the how do you call it? The cat goes away, so the rats are coming to it. Now, if he tells them, Lechu v'ani avo acharichem, go and I'm coming after you, kevan shitalmu enav mehem tarototoma. The second that he did, meaning the fact that he comes and he tells them, I'm coming to you, go, start, I'm coming later. So then what happens? All of a sudden it becomes tameh. Maishna reisha, maishna sefer. What's the difference between the reisha and the seifa? Also in the reisha, everything should be tameh because it wasn't nishma. It wasn't watched over. You're right. They're afraid that maybe they're not going to open it up because maybe something's going to happen. He's going to come right away, whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, right, it wasn't watched over. And if it wasn't watched over, that's it. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, says Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, Reisha b'metaher chamarav u'polav lekach. He says in the Reisha, what happened was that he purified his workers, right, for this. So therefore, even if they are going to touch it, everything's still tahor. You understand? Everything's still tahor. Because they were purified. So therefore,
in the meantime.
No, but since you came and you purified them, so therefore, even if they are going to come and touch it, they were tahor. So you already did your bit that they are tehorim. In the first case, it could be that they were 100% to me. So I'm going to suspect that they're going to. So ask the Gemara, so Seifa Nami, the Seifa also should be the same halacha, which means that why don't we come and we say that in the Seifa, if they went and he purified the workers, so therefore the fact that he purified these workers, so therefore what is the problem of Tumah? So says the Gemara, it says, an Ama'aretz is not going to be makpid on the maga of his friend, which means we're going to suspect that maybe his friend is going to come and touch the wine, which is going to be inside of the barrel. Meaning he himself, no, because even if he would touch it, big deal. But if I'm an Ama'aretz, I'm not going to be makpid that you would touch it, and maybe you're coming, not me. Me, I was forced to do tevilah because of my master, my boss. But you, meaning an Ama'aretz is not careful that his friend should touch the wine. Now, if his friend touches the wine, it's going to be tameh. So says the Gemara, 1 second, if that's the problem, so yachi reisha nami. So then you go back to the reisha, also the same question. Meaning, if you're already telling me that an Ma'aretz is not makbid for his friend, so the reisha is still going to be a problem.
No, still
so says the Gemara, what does it mean? When the balabait could come to them pitom, and the fact that he could come to them all of a sudden, right, without any warning, so all of a sudden, what happens is they're makbid that they're not going to let anybody else touch the wine, because then the balabait is going to go, what are you guys touching my wine? So the barrel's open. What are you guys doing? And he said, you guys are supposed to be transporting barrels of closed wine, not open wine. What are you guys doing? So they're afraid of doing that. So they wouldn't do it. So the Gemara says the same thing. So if that's the case, so then the Seifa should also be the same thing. If we're talking about that the Balabai could pitom just get there, so then again, they're going to be careful. So he says, no. The second that he comes and he says, go, I'm coming after you. What does that mean? Yeah, you know what that means. Another 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. When people come and they tell you, yeah, we'll do it. But afterwards, you already know there's a dirty game there. So these guys are coming and saying, you know what? The boss is telling us he's going to come later. You know what that means. That means either he's not coming at all or he'll come. He'll come. So they have a free-for-all. Hadran alach and dorshin. Starts the new perek.
Wait, sorry.
Says the new Mishnah, the new perek. Perek shali, third perek. Chomer bakodesh mi batruma. We know there's a chumrah in kodesh more than truma. Remember, kodesh is any type of korbanot. Korbanot are called kodesh. Truma is truma that you have to give to the kohen. Okay, so now dinei truma v'ta'arav kodesh are more chamur than truma. Number one, in these halachot we're going to mention. Okay, number one, matbilin kelim betoch kelim letruma, avalo lekodesh, which means like this. I right now I have a mikveh ta'ara, and I have kelim tameim, so I could come and I could to purify them. I could put them in other kelim which are tameim, and I could purify them. But I could only do that for truma, not for kodesh. Which means, let's say I've got a pot and I've got a fork, right? They're both tameh. So for truma, I could do tevilat kelim for both in one shot, one inside of the other, no problem. But not for kodesh. Kodesh, I cannot do that. Okay, for sure, because this is yeah. Now next, achoraim, halacha number 2, achoraim betoch ubeta tzevita betruma, which means to do with the truma, there's a difference between the back part of the kli, right, which is a tzad chitzoni, the outer side of the kli, and the inner side of the kli. Ubeta tzvita shelo, which is a chelek misuyam of the kli, which we're going to explain later on in the Gemara Kaf Bet Amud Bet, right? That means if it's going to become tameh, v'chule v'chule. Okay, now the inside and the outside, they're all different halachot. Okay, so now he comes and he says, avalo bekodesh. Bekodesh, to do the kodesh, everything is one body. That means even if you're going to say that the outside was tameh, it becomes the inside tameh, and also the beta tzvita shelo is going to become tameh. That means everything becomes tameh. That means to do with the kodesh, which is korbanot, the entire kli is one entity. So the entire kli becomes tameh. To do with truma, only maybe part of the kli will become tameh. Maybe only the outside, but not the inside. Maybe only this part, but not that. In a sense, that's the way it is.
Could be also inner layer.
Says the Gemara, the Mishnah. Number 3, halacha number 3, hanoseta midras. Right? That means basically like this. Let's say right now a person is a zav. Okay, now we know that an azav is also an avatuma. Tumim etamei adam bekelim. So a zav, right? And that's a problem because if a person's a zav and he comes and he pats you on the back, right? You become tameh. You right? That means he was the avatuma. You become a rishon. And you're mamash a rishon. You understand? You're a rishon letuma. So what happens is, right? Afa adam anoset tameh. The same halacha would apply somebody that carries, right, the tameh. Okay. So that's the concept of midras. Okay. So now he comes and he says that whether they're going to lie down on it or sit down on it or lean upon it, all these things. Okay. So now he comes and he says like this. So to do with tumat midras of a zav, it's an avatuma which is mitamem kelim b'maga, right? We're touching it, and adam b'maga umasa, whether it's touching it or carrying it. Now he could be noseta truma. He could carry the truma, and we're not going to suspect that the truma will become tameh al yidei midras. Right? That means obviously we're talking about that he's not mamash actually touching it. So for example, he's carrying it in an earthenware, again, kli cheres. And the midras itself, right, is not going to be mitameh the kli, right? As we already said, kli cheres is not mitameh migabo, only from the inside, not from the outside. Here we have to what we learned before. Avalot kodesh, but not for the kodesh, which means he cannot carry the kodesh, because in kodesh they were more machmirim. The Gemara is going to explain in Daf Kaf Bet and Daf Gimel. Halacha number 4, bigdei ochle truma. Kohanim, which are teorim, that they come and they eat truma, their clothing are considered tumat midras for kodesh, to do with kodesh. It means even though they watch themselves to eat truma, they are not holy enough, right, in order to eat kodesh, because kodesh is a higher level. Number 5, lo kemidata kodesh midata truma. To do with the following halacha, it's not the same midot. What does it mean the same midot? But kodesh, if a person has a beged tameh that he has to do tevilah in order for kodesh, and he has a beged, right? Right, it's called, let's say, a knot or whatever it is. He cannot do the tevilah unless he unties the knot before the tevilah. Uminagev, right? Then he has to come and he has to be minagev umatbil, right? Then he has to come and he has to first, if it's moist, he has to dry it, and then he does the tevilah. Why? Because the lachut is also considered a chatzitza, meaning the moisture is also considered a chatzitza. Okay. Exactly. No, but the thread was just that it could still become tameh. Here we're talking about that it's a chatzitza even, meaning the fact that it's wet, it's a chatzitza. And afterwards, kosher, he ties it back, but in truma, kosher ve'achar kach matbil, right? He comes and he says there's no din of chatzitza. They weren't as machmir in truma like the din of kodesh. Halacha number 6 says, right? Kelim marim betara tzrichim tevila lekodesh, aval lo letruma. What does that mean? When you have a keli which is finished, right? It's gemar melachtam. They're already right towards the gemar melachtam. They're already fitting to become a kabel tuma. But you were careful that you were shomer atam betara. Still, they need tevila for kodesh, but not for tuma. Meaning, a utensil, as long as it's not a utensil, it doesn't make kabel tuma. Once it's close to becoming a utensil, now it could be mekabel tuma. Let's say I come and say, yeah, but Rabbi, I was watching it the entire time. At the end, I was watching it. So for truma, I don't need to do tevila. For kodesh, I do need to do tevila. Number 7, if you had a whole bunch of types of food, of kodesh inside a kli, and you touched, right, in one of them, the kli is mitzaref everything that they all become tameh. So imagine, I've got here a cup, but inside that, or I've got there, that's much better. I've got an entire plate, and I've got many different croissants. Somebody that's tameh, he comes, and he only touches one of them. By kodesh, hakli mitzarfan, the kli is mitzaref everything together, they all become tameh. Why? They're all in one utensil, but not by truma. By truma, en hakli mitzaref otam to tuma, but rather only that piece becomes a rishon tuma, and if that piece is touching something else, it'll become a sheni. And if it was again, obviously, if that would touch another one, it'll become a shlishi, right? To do that, 1 second. Number 8, harrevi'i kodesh pasul, v'shlishi truma. This is the one that we already mentioned in the beginning. By kodesh, it could become a revi'i. By truma, the maximum is a shlishi, which means to do it the kodesh, you could go until a revi'i of truma. Right? That's the highest one, right? But by truma, it's only a shlishi. Number 9, by truma, let's say one of your hands become tameh. So one of your hands become tameh, the other hand is still tahor. So you could have one hand tameh, one hand tahor. By kodesh, you have to do tevilah for shtehem. Because one hand contaminates the other hand by kodesh, but not by truma. That means we make a chumrah, they're both tameh. Remember, these are all stringencies by kodesh more than truma. Number 10, ochalin neguvim, biyadayim mesuavot betruma. You're allowed to eat foods which are dry. Neguvin naguf, right, is dry, right? That they never became susceptible for tuma. With yadayim tmeot, why? Right, just like shniot letuma, that you could do for truma. Now, even though your hands are shniot and they're poslot the truma, here the truma never became susceptible for truma. Why? Because it never got water, never got wet, right? There was lavdavka water. Remember, it's yad shachadam, any of the 7 liquids that come in contact and it becomes susceptible for truma. Avalo bekodesh. For kodesh, you're not allowed to. That means even though the kodesh did not become susceptible for tuma, we don't do that. Ha'onen, number 11, and this is the final one. Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph. Ha'onen, somebody that's in aninut. Aninut means that a person, a family member, passed away, and they are within the period of the mourning before the burial. Umechusar kippurim, or a person that's tameh, that he's obligated to bring a korban, but he doesn't become 100% pure until he does his korban. That means he went to the mikveh and everything, but he did not bring his korban. So the Chachamim were machmirim, right? That even though the onen did not become tameh for his met, and it already passed the aninut, or mechusar kepurim, even though he already brought his korban, and mina Torah he's able to. Tzrichim tevilah lakodesh. They still have to do tevilah for kodesh, but not for truma. They don't need to do it for truma because they're allowed to eat it. The onen, even within the time of aninut or mechusar kepurim, even before he brought his korban, they're allowed for the truma, but not for the kodesh.